So we left off with that invoice. We had all those, the shipping was added in. We had the modifiers added in. So the next step is to add in a partial payment. Partial payments come in, whereas if myself as the buyer, if I'm sitting here on this timeline, this of course is the end of my discount period. And I'm getting close to that, the end of that discount period. I don't have enough money to pay the whole bill. Let's say we have a $5,000 invoice, and it is a 2% discount if we get the cash discount. I get to this point right here, though, and I don't have $5,000. So I'm going to pay as much as I can so that I can still get some of that discount. So let's say I managed to pay $3,000. Here's the tricky part. The amount that I'm going to get credited for. Remember, we said the invoice times the discount times that discount. In this case, that'd be 0.98, 1 minus the discount, equals the amount we have to pay. So in this case, the $3,000 is the amount we're going to pay, not the amount of the invoice. So the amount that goes here is the amount that we're going to get credited for. That's what is going to get subtracted from our account. Where it gets tricky is the 2% does not apply to the $3,000. The 2% comes from the amount we're going to get credited for. So how do we handle this? This is the amount we're looking for, the credit, times the 0.98 equals the amount we're going to pay is $3,000. How are we going to solve for that 0.98? We have to divide. Solve for the credit, I mean, not the 0.98. We divide by 0.98. The amount of credit we get is 3,000 divided by 0.98, which is going to be what? 3,061.22. That is the credit. That's how much they subtract from our account. So, let's say that we have an in.
What does that answer?
Well, what that means is what we owe. Good question. What we owe now, the original balance was $5,000. What we owe now is $5,000 minus $3,061.22. So $1,938.78 is what we owe. That is our balance. The $3,000 is the amount we were able to pay. That's the payment we made. Well, the actual amount of the discount you can't find directly. You have the amount that you paid, which is the $3,000, and you use that to find the amount you get credit for. Now, if you needed to find the actual amount of the discount, well, we paid $3,000, we got credit for that. So you could subtract them. You got $61.22 discount. But as the buyer, that doesn't really matter to you. Now the seller, some sellers in their bookkeeping will write that off as a discount expense. But it all depends on how they do book. Some sellers do their bookkeeping as what comes in as cash is their income. Other sellers would put the whole amount in as income and then expense any discounts that have to get paid out, or they don't collect, I should say. No, it's all a matter of bookkeeping. For the most part, we don't really ever need to calculate the amount of the discount. What we need is the amount that gets credited to the account. I won't throw the amount of the discount on your test. So let's say we have an invoice for the amount of $6,500. A partial payment of $2,000 is made during the 1% discount period. Find the outstanding balance. Sometimes they'll word it as outstanding balance. Sometimes they'll just say find the balance. So the first thing we need to find here is the amount of the credit. How much gets credited to our account? How do we find the amount of the credit again? Well, it's the reverse of that discount formula. We're going to take the dollar amount here, which is $2,000, and instead of multiplying by the complement of the discount, we divide. So our $2,000 payment divided by 1% discount gives us 0.99. $2,020.20, right? That is the amount that gets credited to our account for that payment. So how much is our balance? Our balance is equal to the invoice amount of $6,500 minus the credit of $2,020.20. Otherwise known as $4,479.80. Any questions? Well, let's have you guys try one. Our invoice date is May 18th. The amount, $4,000. The terms, 210 EOM. Partial payment of $2,000 is made on June 8th. Find the balance. I'm going to give you a minute, see what you come up with, and we'll talk about this. So I'm going to start out with a timeline. When does our timeline start? May 30th. Very good. Because it's EOM, it does not start on the invoice date. It starts on May 30th, the effective invoice date. So our discount would end on June 10th. And our credit period would end on June 30th. So on this payment, do they get a discount? Yes, they do. They get a discount of 2%. So our first step is to find the credit for that payment, which is going to be $2,000. What are we going to do to it? Divide by 0.98. Very good. 2,000 divided by 0.98 is what? 2,041 2,081. 40.82. Thank you. 2040.82. Thanks. So 2040.82. That is our credit. What's our next step? Subtract it. Find the balance. We take the 4,000 minus the 2040.82, which is going to give us 1959.18. Good. How many of you got that? What's that? You don't have to do the timeline. It's just, I do it for illustration in class. So now, let's do this. Our invoice date is October 28th. The invoiced amount, $9,000. Terms, 110 EOM. Prepaid, $500 in freight. Partial payment of $4,000 is made on December 8th. Find the balance. Now, I'm going to draw the timeline for this one. EOM, it just is always easier for me to draw a timeline. The big question is, where does this timeline start? November 30th. Very good. Because it's after the 26th, on or after the 26th, it does not go into the October batch, it goes in the November batch. So this is December 10th and December 30th. So December 8th does fall in that discount period. So we're going to get a 1% discount. So what do we do next? Not times, divided by. But I'm also saying it's not 4,000. This changes things. $500 of prepaid freight. When you make a payment, well, we said earlier you never get a discount on freight. Well, also the first thing paid is always freight, because that is an expense. That if I'm the seller, that's money that I paid out that wasn't my responsibility. You owe that back to me. So I want that first. So I'm getting my freight reimbursed first. So out of that $4,000 that was paid, the first thing that happens is we take out that freight. So only $3,500 is going to go towards the invoice. The freight is now cleared up. That's gone. It's paid off. Now it is a 1% discount. So now we take the $3,500 divided by 0.99. Very good. $3,535.35 is the credit. So the balance, we'll take our $9,000 and we're going to subtract 35.35 gives us $5,464.65. What do you think? Well, you are getting reimbursed. This is the reimbursement. The seller prepaid the freight. So when the buyer makes a payment, the first thing that happens is that freight is reimbursed. So out of that $4,000, the first $500 goes towards the freight. Does that make sense? There's two things about freight that you need to know. Freight, this is when the buyer is paying. In other words, FOB shipping point. Two things about it. One is never a discount on freight. to always paid first. You'll always subtract from the payment first, yes. So, let's look at a couple of problems here. So we have an invoice date of November 8th. Amount $6,000. We'll keep it simple. Terms 210 net 30 ROG. Prepaid 400 in freight. Delivery confirmation is November 21st. Partial payment of $2,500 is made on November 28th. Find the balance. So I'm going to make out the timeline just to be consistent. What is the start of our timeline here? November 21st. Because it is ROG, we go to November 21st. So that makes this December 1st. And this is going to be December 20th, right? Sorry, 21st. December 21st. Our November 28th is definitely within our discount period. What's the first thing we do with our payment? Subtract the freight. So we got $2,500 payment. $2,500 payment. Subtract our freight of $400. So $2,100 is what's going to get applied to the invoice. Now what do we do with the $2,100? It's 2%, so divided by 0.98. So 2,100 divided by 0.98 is 2142.84. Is that correct? 86? Yeah, I rounded off one. Okay, 2142.86. That is our credit. So what do we do next? Find the balance. We have an invoice of $6,000. We subtract that credit, 2142.86, which is going to give us $3,857.14. What do you think? Ready to try one on your own? So our invoice date, December 27th. Invoice amount, $15,000. Terms, 110 EOM. Prepaid $800 in freight. Partial payment made on February 5th for $5,000. Find the balance. I'll give you a couple minutes. So I'm going to start off by giving you the timeline. Because of the EOM and it's after the 26th, this goes into the January batch, January 31st batch. So the discount period goes up to February 10th. Now because it's February, I put question marks here. There is no February 30th, so it depends on the company how that handles. We don't need to deal with that for this problem. So we get the discount, 1%. What do we do next? We're going to pay the freight. You got it. So we're going to subtract 800, is it? So 4,200 goes to the invoice. So then what? 4,200 divided by 0.99 will be 42.42. That is our credit. And the balance, you got it, 15,000 minus 42.42, which gives us $10,757.58. What do you think? Good stuff? One more example for you guys to try. Okay, a couple more examples for you guys to try. So our invoice date, I'm sorry, I really am. Our invoice date is February 3rd. The amount is $8,000. Terms, 210, net 30, prepaid, 500 in freight, how much is paid total if paid on February 10th? I'll give you a minute to work that one. If you noticed here, I reversed this problem, went back to what we were doing before break in our previous problems. They paid the full amount. So we start out with the $8,000 balance, and what do we do to it? We multiply by 0.98. Figure out how much does it cost, because they're paying the full amount. We have to figure out how much they're going to cost. It's going to cost to pay off that whole amount. So 8,000 times 0.98 is 7,860, right? 40? Thank you. 40. That's the amount that they have to pay off the invoiced amount. And then we're going to add the freight to that, because they don't get the discount on the freight. We take the discount first, then add in the freight. I wanted to throw that one in there just because you get in that habit of starting to divide the payment by the discount. You've got to make sure, are we looking at, if we have the amount paid, which is what we had in those first problems before this one, and we're looking for the credit, then it is going to be the payment divided by that rate to get the amount of the credit. If we have the amount of the credit, in other words, if we're paying off the full amount, and we want to figure out how much we're going to have to pay, it is that full amount times that credit rate, that discount rate, to get how much we have to pay. So in this case, we were paying off the full amount. So we're multiplying by the rate to get how much we have to pay. Okay, well, this next one, I hate to do this to you at this point in the night, but I have to. Well, says the test you're going to take in 2 weeks has a problem just like this on it. PFM Corp. Purchases $12,000 of merchandise. They receive a trade discount of $9.11. Invoice is dated July 27th. Terms are 210 EOM. The seller prepaid $700 in freight. The buyer pays $7,000 on September 8th. Find the balance. Let's work through this one. What's given up here for $12,000? Is that the invoiced amount? This is actually before the invoice. How do I know it's before the invoice? Because they're listing a trade discount. The trade discount comes before the invoice. So what are we going to do with that 911 trade discount? We're going to find that single net, that net decimal equivalent. We do 0.91 times what? 0.89. Good. Giving us 0.8099. What do we do with that? Well, we take our 12,000 list price times that net equivalent. You can do it all at once if you want. Unless I specifically ask for the net decimal equivalent, you don't have to get that. You can just, and that's the way I usually do it. I do 12,000 times 0.91 times 0.89 all at once. Which gives us 97,1880. What is this amount here that I just found? That's the net amount, the net price, and that's what goes to the invoice. That is the invoiced amount. So now we have all the invoice information. We have the invoice date, which is July 27th. We have the invoice amount, which is the 97,1880, and we have the terms, 210 EOM, yeah, 210 EOM. And we had freight was prepaid of $700. My timeline is not going to start on July 27th. It's going to start on August 31st. So this goes to September 10th, which means their payment on September 8th of $7,000 is going to get some credit. Now we're reverting back to what we just finished up a few minutes ago. What do we do with that $7,000? Now you're going to want to say we're going to divide by 0.98, but what do we have to do first? We have to do the freight. Exactly. So our $7,000 payment minus the $700 in freight, $6,300 is what goes to the invoice amount. Now we're going to find our credit by taking that $6,300 and dividing by 0.98. This is going to give us 6,400. What's that? Oh, 64.2857. What you got? That's how much they credit to us. So we go back to our invoiced amount, $97,1880. And we're going to subtract 6,428.57. And that gives us $3,290.23 is our balance. Does that make sense? That's a lot to swallow at this point in the night, isn't it? Do you guys want to try one of those? No? I mean, you want to try one on your own without my help? No? Can I just call her a night and we'll start out next week? We'll do a quick review before we start our new stuff next week? Okay. So, there is a new quiz. It is due tomorrow, Friday, by 11:59 p.m. That's going to finish up our statistics stuff. Then there is new homework that is due next week, next Thursday. It's on this lovely stuff we just discussed. Have a great week.